Hey YouTube, what is good? So this week I'll be showing you a little behind the scenes from a shoot event we had last week. And I'll be explaining some light setups when we're talking about color gels in general. So let's roll that intro and let's just show you the behind the scenes. So you're just seeing a little behind the scenes segment from the shoot we had with Mademoiselle Inked. I will link the Instagram somewhere below here. And I'm gonna run through how we did the lighting because you've already seen it, but let me explain some things so that you will be a little bit wiser or have an idea why I put some lights this way or that way. And some tips and tricks for when you're shooting with gels, how to use them or what's the best scenario. So let's go. So first thing is first, it was a light setup with 3 lights. So we have 2 lights in the background and 1 in the front. If you looked closely, you can see that 2 lights in the background were just normal open reflectors with a grid in it. Why do we use a grid? With a grid we can focus the beam of light, so we can control the light more instead of just having the open reflector which would like open up really wide. So if we use a reflector with a grid, instead of the light bundle going this way, we will be focusing the light and being more that way. So that's something, if you want a lot of accent lights on the edge of the model, you can use like, just an open reflector. If you want more concentrated light, you will use a grid in an open reflector. Another way is you can also use other modifiers on top of your normal strobes, like a softbox. But then you have to gel a little bit more. I will talk about that later. So the 2 lights in the background, both of them were orange in this shot. And then the light in the front was a strip bank with a grid with a blue gel attached to it. There's a little segment in the video where you can actually see it. So it's just like a, some sort of gel, and it just goes in front of the strobe where there's a grid attached and 2 inner bevels. And it just goes in front of the strobe. And that way you will have a soft key light instead of a hard light. So when we mix the open reflectors with the softbox in the front, we are actually using soft and hard light together. So when we use those together, like I said before, it's important when you choose your modifiers to know how well the skin is of the model and how well you want it to be defined. Like if you use an open reflector, you're using hard light combined with the softness of the frontal light. So the edges will have more issues in regards of skin than the front light, because in the front you will be using an even bigger light, so it will be softer. So that's one of the first things. So when we mean an open reflector, we mean this with a grid attached in it. So if you look at it in different angles, you will see through it. So that way you know when you will have light going through it. So if we use it as an open reflector, we have this, so the light can go all the way. If we use this on top of it, you will focus the light beam. So this is an open reflector. Now, let me put that on the side. Now, when we talk about gels, we mean these kind of colored sheets. Now, this is a really dark one, but we have also the cyan one. So this one is cyan, and as you can see, if you put it to the strobe, make sure that, let me put it closer. So make sure that you don't put it too close to your modeling light, because it gets hot and it melts. So be careful. That's one of the first tips. Now for the rest, these are squared ones, but you also have them like on rolls, which are tall. And that's what I use when I'm putting them on my strip boxes, which are 1.20 meters at, I think it is 50. So then I use them on, because they are bigger. Another thing you can do is put them inside of the modifier so that you actually gel the the strobe, the flash with these kind of gels. The only problem is to attach them, so that's with tape. Another important thing is when you're using gels like this, you have to attach them to a modifier. So this has to go in front of this. The way we do it is we use tape, but we don't use normal tape. We use gaffer tape, which doesn't leave any glue residue when we remove it. So keep that in mind. Don't just use normal tape, because when you use normal tape, it will leave those sticky traces on your modifier, which is this is metal. So keep that in mind. Use gaffer tape. It's a little bit more expensive, but in the end, it will be worth it. So that's one of the first things. Now for the light, it's just a matter of what you want. So for this, we used a blue as a main light, and then we did 2 accent lights in orange because they work nicely together. Orange and blue, cyan and magenta. Green is a tricky one. So this one is a tricky one because in our minds, we always link this green or green in general with somebody being ill, sick. So we try to avoid it. It can be cool in the background, but it really depends on, what vibe you're going for. So those are gels in general. Now, for these specific images, in the background, we didn't just use a plain background. We used some curtains. So when we are using curtains, it gives those images a little bit of a softness look. And it also gives some depth in it. So if you have watched the previous video where I go through layers in Capture One, you can actually see that by painting light and dark in the background, you create some depth in the image. So it looks like she's further away from the background instead of just being in front of a normal plain white backdrop or black backdrop. So that's another thing. Now, if we want to play around with colors, one of the important tips I can give you is make sure that when you want to mix colors together, that you are working in shadows. So that means only color will show up where the area is dark. So if we mix, for instance, let me have a look around. If we mix, you can see they have been used like crazy already. Of course, I only got green here. So let me see. If you mix colors, for instance, these two. So we got pink. Not sure if it shows up nicely on the camera. So we got pink. And now we got blue. So if we mix those two together, which is a really popular combination, you are creating complementary colors, which defines in our brain a nice image. So keep that in mind when mixing up colors. Also, when you mix a lot of colors together, you will create at a certain point white. So again, don't throw just everything together. Start with one light, put a second light, put a third light if you need it, and build it up slowly. So each time you switch on a strobe, you will see what the light does, and then you can start combining it, putting things brighter or darker. Another important thing is if you don't see any color in your shot, like if you put this in front of a strobe, you switch on your strobe, you put it on max, probably you won't see a lot of color. So don't put too much power on your strobes to see color. It's better to put your strobe pretty low so that you still have a saturated image and you don't blow all the light through the gel, because then the saturation will be blown out. So that's another thing. Another important thing we use when we are shooting with gels is oil. So this is not a normal spray. It's like, let me see. It's olive oil spray. And we spray this on a model. Why do we prefer a spray instead of just basic oil? If we use a spray, we don't have any lines from like messing it up, putting it on you. Like if you use a spray, it doesn't have those trace lines from your hands, fingers. So with a spray, it's just evenly spread. Also, if you are using a spray or oil in general, make sure that your highlights are not blown out, because with the oil, it reflects more. So you will have a quicker blown out highlight instead of just using no oil. Now with the oil, there's a lot of difference because it will reflect light a lot better than just normally on your skin. So keep that in mind. So most of the tricks are heat. Watch out with heat. combine lights and make sure that you use grids on them to focus the light beams, because otherwise the light spill, color spill and light spill will be too much. It will be difficult to get colors in certain places. Use oil, spray, and that's about it. And don't put your power of the strobe too high. So those tips I can give you. Play around with it. Curious, have you played around with colors before, or is it the first time you see that it's actually done with these kind of sheets? They're not that expensive. It's like, I think 13 euros for an entire package. Of course, there are bigger ones. Those are more expensive. For the big sheets, I paid around 11 or 12 euros. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, that will be it for this week. If you got questions about colored setups or gels in general, feel free to let me know below. Give me some love by hitting that thumbs up button, subscribe, and then I'll see you when I see you. Ciao, ciao.